As men, especially as doctors, sometimes we hyper-focus on our career, neglecting other facets of our lives. But that is about to change. This is Dads Before Doctors. Some physicians claim their family is their top priority, but their lives tell a very different story. We'll help each other become family men who are doctors rather than doctors who have families. If it's health, wealth and legacy, emotional well-being, parenting, professional goals, or marriage, we're talking about it. Thanks for listening, and make sure to subscribe. This is Dads Before Doctors, and this is your host, Adam Broussard, MD.
All right, welcome back to Dads Before Doctors podcast. Today we are joined by Dr. Leif Dahleen, also known as Physician on Fire. Welcome, Leif. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Adam. I'm really glad to be here with you.
So can you just tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up in the Dahleen family?
Yeah, my father was a dentist and my mother was a registered nurse, although she stayed home for the majority of my childhood to help raise my brother and I. There were two of us. With my father being a dentist, I guess we were solid middle class to maybe upper, middle upper, whatever you want to call it, somewhere in between. And, we didn't want for anything, but my parents were relatively frugal. I definitely picked up some habits from them. They would always stop at the, thrift stores. Garage sailing is a big thing for them. They taught us to look at like the scratch and dent or open box section at any department store. So, we had a lot, but we were thrifty in certain ways. And, even with vacations, we would do like a fly drive deal where you fly to Florida, but you drive a rental car back in the spring because the rental car companies wanted to move the cars up north where they would be needed for the summer. Little things like that my parents would do, to help build their wealth. And I saw that. And so I think I've emulated a lot of what I learned growing up.
Awesome. So you later started, Physician on Fire, started off as a blog. What made you, kind of get that started? What inspired you to start that? Yeah,
it started as a blog and it remains a blog. I don't have a podcast like you, and I don't do a whole lot else, although I guess I do have, the social media aspect and some Facebook groups. But what triggered me to start this was discovering a couple of other blogs. One called Mr. Money Mustache, which is all about FIRE, and it approaches it from I should probably back up, FIRE being financial independence, retire early. It's an acronym. Just the concept that once you've saved a certain amount of money and or you have truly passive income coming in that covers your expenses, then work becomes optional. And that was a crazy revelation to me. 10 years into my career, I was just about to turn 40 when I started reading this stuff. I was like, oh, wow, this is remarkable. I thought I had probably 15, 20 years of a career left. And I realized I could have 15 or 20 weeks left if I so desired. And then I read, a little more about that, which led me to some other blogs, including The White Coat Investor, which remains a great blog. And I saw, his perspective from, physician point of view, but he wasn't talking much about FIRE. And, the one article he had about early retirement was 14 reasons not to do it. And I could pretty easily refute most of them. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll try bringing this financial independence message to the higher income folks, people that maybe aren't as interested in frugality. A lot of the OG FIRE bloggers were all, definitely leaning towards the frugal side of things and spending maybe $30,000 to $50,000 a year, whereas we were spending double that. And so that voice wasn't really out there, so I thought I'd put it out there.
Yeah. Was it more to educate others, or was it just kind of documenting what you were learning, or a combination of both originally?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of everything, but I definitely wanted to reach people because I didn't know about financial independence, the 4% withdrawal rate, and all of these things that were new to me. I figured it would be new to probably 95% of other physicians, if not more, because I considered myself to be somewhat financially savvy. But I guess I never really thought about the retirement piece, because that, in my mind, was at least a decade or two away.
So as you started to learn this, how did it change some of the, I guess, financial stuff you were doing, or did it? You just realized that you were doing it right?
I was already, pretty well versed in the things that I was doing at the time, and I haven't changed a whole lot. I had been reading the Bogleheads forum and Bogleheads wiki, which is, it's just a site based on the teachings and beliefs of John Bogle, who founded Vanguard in the 1970s. Index fund investing, keep expenses low, pay yourself first, save, a good chunk of your income. I was already doing all those things. And so not much really changed, other than, my career trajectory, I guess, is the big thing.
So when in the process did the blog start kind of getting bigger, and what do you think when it started, growing a bigger following?
Yeah, I was really pleased in those early months, and I remember I'd have a post go out, and you can see the stats. You can see how many people are on a site at any given time, how many views each page has had. And I would see a few dozen views, and I'd be kind of excited in the morning. And then pretty soon it was a few hundred views. And once I got to maybe 1,000 views a day, advertisers started reaching out. And one cool thing that happened really early on, I was reading The White Coat Investor, and I would comment on his things occasionally. And when you leave a comment on a blog post, you can have your name linked to your own website. There's a little field where you just enter your website. And so Jim Dawley, he's the guy behind The White Coat Investor, he kind of noticed me and checked out my site. He emailed me and said, "Hey, how about a guest post?" I said, "Hey, that'd be great. I'll write you something." And so putting some of my writing on his site early on definitely helped bring people to my site as well. And so, yeah, once I had about 1,000 page views a day, people wanted to advertise with me, and I didn't even know even how to put an ad on the site, let alone what to charge or anything. So I figured out, to the best of my ability, what I might be able to try to charge, and figured out how do I put an image that would be an ad on the site and link to somebody else's business. But yeah, early on, I was just kind of figuring it out on the fly and working full time.
Awesome.
It was a challenge.
You have a charitable mission for the blog too. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was coming at this, as a hobby at first, and then I realized it was going to make some money. So I was out there telling the world via my blog posts that, hey, I'm financially independent. I don't need to work anymore. And it felt rather disingenuous to, I don't want to say plaster the site with ads, but even have any sort of monetization on there when I'm trying to convince people I don't need money. So I thought, well, maybe I'll, donate a significant chunk of what I'm bringing in. And initially I pledged to donate half. And over the first 4 to 5 years, I donated, I think, more than half of my profits. We're now in year 6 or year 7. And I don't have clinical income anymore. And now it's a little bit challenging to donate half, because the IRS will only allow you to donate up to 30% of your AGI when giving appreciated assets, which is what I prefer to do. But I have a feeling I'll end up donating more than half eventually when some other things happen, hopefully in my investing life and whatnot. But yeah, it's been, when I say half, I'm talking multiple 6 figures, maybe 500,000 or more that we've donated between. And when I say donated, some of it goes to a donor advised fund that we do get to control. We've donated 6 figures from our donor advised fund or funds, but some of that money remains there invested. I can't take it back, but I can decide which charities get the money eventually. So I kind of treat that as an endowment, where I have this pool of money that I can use to donate to charities over a lifetime, including after I stop earning income whenever that might be.
That's great.
If that makes sense. That was a long-winded answer, I realize.
No, absolutely. And I know some readers get to help choose with some of the charities too.
Yeah. I've done that the last 3 Giving Tuesdays. I just tell people, hey, name a charity, put it in the comments, give me the info so I don't have to dig around trying to find the actual name of it or their IRS tax ID, because that's really easy to find on a number of different sites, but not if you don't have the actual name of the charity and some other things. But long story short, I have very, very minimal criteria. I'm not going to give to religious or political organizations, but pretty much anything else. So I let 100 people tell me where to donate $100, and then all of our sponsors, advertisers, I ask them. It ends up being about 13 to 15,000 that we give out. And then this last year, this was a cool thing that happened. About a half a dozen readers also said, hey, I'll give, to some charities that people have chosen. Actually started with one gentleman who 2 years ago decided, like, hey, it looks like you have more than 100 requests. I was like, yeah, and it's okay. I'll just, he's like, oh no, I'll pick up the last, dozen or so. And he donated to those requests. But this year we had like 5 or 6 people do 10 requests each. So I think our total impact was about 20,000 on Giving Tuesday. And
that's awesome.
And then we support the salary of one of the physicians at a surgical center in Honduras. That's a free site. That's a permanent site that I volunteered at, brought my family down a couple times back when I was still doing anesthesia. And then various local charities. We gave away a good deal of money when COVID hit. Didn't know what else to do. So I threw some money at it. I had offered to go back to my old job if they needed help because someone's out with COVID or their ICU was overrun. They didn't end up needing help because they were actually less busy than ever, as were a lot of operating rooms, with elective surgeries being held and all of that. So yeah, it's been something, having that charitable mission really kind of motivates me to continue to grow this website and business. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you said that when you started really diving into some of the financial independence and retire early, you realized that that was possible in weeks to months instead of years. So how much longer, or why did you choose to end up retiring early?
Yeah, so I ended up coming up with about a 5-year plan. At the time when I discovered it, we were at like a baseline FI, having right around 25 times what we were typically spending in 1 year. When I looked at and added up all of our investments. And I wanted a bigger cushion than that. I also had just moved and bought a house and started a great job. It was actually, I think it was the best anesthesia job I had in my, what ended up being a 13-year career. But I'd gotten somewhat unlucky with the hospital where I was working going bankrupt. And then I did quite a bit of locums and took a job that was a good job, but maybe not in the best location for my family and I. So I ended up having a few permanent, quote unquote, permanent jobs in my days. But no, the last job I had was the best job. And so I kind of came up with about a 5-year plan, and we finished out maybe 4.5 years of that. But I got a little antsy towards the end and started working part-time. Yeah. Ended up leaving anesthesia. I guess I can say for good at this point, because I've let my license lapse, although the state of Minnesota says I can get that back if I really want to within 9 months. Anyway, it was August of 2019. So it's been 2.5 years now since I've been in an operating room.
Yeah. So can you kind of walk us through like how you went about making that decision and what a lot of people will talk about, not running away from something, running towards something, or what was the thought of what your plans were for post OR time?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. So initially when I first learned about this, I did a lot of reading and studying and made my own spreadsheets and projections, and figured out that we would really be in very good financial shape, even to spend quite a bit more than we were if we wanted to, and the markets were kind to us over most of my career and in the few years since, and so a lot of conversations with my wife about what we wanted life to look like, and she loved the idea of traveling, and we timed things based on a couple of factors. I would say the primary one would be the age of our kids. They would finish out grade school. They were in a gifted program. My son would finish it. My older son would finish, and my younger son would finish third grade. And we figured we had a few years before high school, maybe 3 to 4 years, that we could really travel extensively and do the slow travel thing where you go someplace for a few weeks to months, rather than just squeeze in a vacation in a week or two and have these busy, hectic vacations where you need a vacation from it when you get home, right? So, she was totally on board. So once our children finished, like I said, third and fourth grade, that's when we started traveling. And it also happened that a guy from Brainerd, Minnesota, which is where I was practicing in my last job, reached out when he was in anesthesia. We call it a CA1 in his first year of the 3 years of anesthesia after the internship. And somehow he found my email address. I think it was through an alumni thing, because he trained where I trained at the University of Florida. And he said, "Hey, if there would ever be an opening in your group, I'd love to join you." And I said, "Well, we're all, in our 40s, early 50s. The only way there'd be an opening is if I made one for you." And then I hadn't really made my plans known to anyone in my group, but I took that as a reason to have that first conversation with my chief about maybe I'd be interested in an earlier exit than they might have expected, frankly, than I expected. So I was able to work another 2.5 years, most of that being part-time, while that resident finished up his training, and then he came and took my spot, and I was part of training him in. Actually was part of my final week on the job, so it was kind of cool.
So how did that conversation go with your chief? And then what kind of response did you get from your coworkers and hospital and whatnot?
Yeah, I played it kind of close to the vest. I didn't talk about the blog. I think I might have mentioned it, to my chief, and I told him that I was planning on leaving early. And I just kind of played it cool, kind of coy. This is what we want to do. We're going to travel for a while. I talked about it as a sabbatical, possibly permanent sabbatical, things like that. But it is a weird thing to talk about, especially when you're working with people that are likely planning to be there for another 10 years or more, and they're the same age or younger or older or whatever. I didn't really know exactly how to handle that socially, but I think people were pretty happy for me and started asking questions, and then I started opening up a little bit more about what it takes to retire and how we were able to get to the point where we could.
So most physicians are very much on that traditional education pathway, just because that's what we've been through. You did well in high school, did well in college, to get into med school, to get into residency, whatnot. How how are you educating your kids with the traveling, and how did you, I guess, learn about some of the world schooling and whatnot?
Yeah. So, we figured the kids would learn a lot culturally and history and all that if we travel, and then see the sites and talk about them, and read about them while we're there or beforehand. And so I would say roughly a third of their education has been just learning about the place that we are visiting. Now COVID threw a big, huge monkey wrench and messed up our plans for about a year and a half where we only traveled domestically. But we got about 6 months of international travel in before COVID. And once our 11-year-old was vaccinated in November, finally, we started traveling again. And we've been to half a dozen countries just in the last few months. So my wife has kind of spearheaded the primary education. I do the proofreading of their essays and whatnot, and I help some with math, and sometimes I do everything. Like this week, I'm solo parenting, and I'll be doing that again in another week or two, while my wife is taking care of a baby 4 hours away for her cousin. So there's so many resources now, and we were lucky in that before COVID, we already kind of had that homeschooling, distance learning thing down, because a lot of people had to figure it out on the fly. And, we were two, quote unquote, stay at home parents, although we didn't stay at home that much. So we had the time and resources to devote to making sure they got what they needed. And our public school system actually has a really cool homeschool public school partnership where they provide a curriculum, they provide some teachers that our kids correspond with, and once a week they have some in-person classes for those who happen to be around. If we're in town, we can go and they get some enrichment type classes. They get music lessons and the class is called like messy exploration and different language stuff. So it's been really good. And we supplement here and there with our own stuff. We use the Duolingo app for language, for example, which reminds me I still need to do mine tonight to keep my streak alive. But so we figured it out on the fly, and my wife has been amazing in figuring out what works for us and what works for the kids, and it's been going really well.
So what if the kids thought about this experience?
They love it. They really enjoy traveling. We started when they were 8 and 10 years old, I believe, and so they they're old enough to have some appreciation for the things they're seeing and the places they're going. While at the same time, I think not the same way that my wife and I are like in awe of what we see in Rome and Athens and ancient Mexico and whatnot. But, they're happy, and we talk about, well, you have the option, you can go back to regular school in person, or we could do this for another year. And they're all about the homeschooling, even though I feel like they probably work more with our homeschooling regimen than they would in a physical classroom. And we make sure that they're staying on track. So they'll take some standardized testing here in a couple weeks on 4 different subjects, just to make sure they're remaining at their upper 90th percentile, which where they've kind of always been. So we're lucky in that our kids are pretty studious, and they seem to be blessed with pretty good brains.
Any issues with like they're leaving their friends from their school, or have they built a big enough community of other homeschool kids? Or
the first few years when we were in Minnesota, they were in this gifted program where they stayed with the same like 20-25 kids from first, second, third, and fourth grade. And so they do have some friends from those days. And we actually just got together, even though we moved away from Minnesota 3 years ago. We got together with my older son's best friend and his family down in Orlando last a week or two ago. So they still occasionally get to see those kids, but it's been a little bit difficult. We moved right when I retired, and then we traveled, and then COVID hit. And so you didn't want to really start growing your social circle when you're supposed to be in a small bubble. So we haven't quite gotten to where we'd like to be as far as them having a lot of friends around here. We certainly have had some really great kids and families in the neighborhoods that we've lived in, and so we've met some people that way. But on the other hand, I know it will be good for them, and we do plan to go back to traditional in-person high school, and that's only a year and a half away for our older son. And so, but that's always a concern. You want them to be socially adept and not those weird homeschooled kids. And I don't think they are that.
I've heard other friends that are choosing to homeschool that their kids like it a lot more because they get to choose their friends rather than like it being the kid that they're sitting next to because they're alphabetical order or whatever.
That's how it was, like med school and like our body buddies. Yeah. I was with the D's.
So for those physicians just kind of learning about, financial independence, retire early, like what do you recommend, how do you start looking into it? And then how, I guess, do you commit to that to start focusing in on making a plan?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm somewhat glad that I didn't know too much about that possibility because I might have had my eyes on the prize and, well, you still need to work for a good 10, 15 years or more, depending on your specialty and where, cost of living where you are. It takes a long time to amass what needs to be, for most physicians, at least a couple $1 million, if not a few or more. But I mean, the main thing is just to grow the gap between how much you earn and how much you spend. And I encourage people, if they can swing it, to try to live on half of what they take home, after taxes. And initially, you might just be paying off debt rather than saving a whole lot for your future. I think you should always max out your retirement accounts, get any tax advantaged savings that you can that way. And then, a mix of further investing versus paying off debt, whatever makes you feel comfortable. But, the key is really brute force savings. Good returns are helpful, but over the short term, like single digit number of years, what matters a lot more is how much you save rather than what you invest in. Over decades, 20, 30, 50 years, then, how you're invested really does make a significant difference. And again, I do primarily index funds. I'm in a little bit of real estate, passive real estate deals. Lately, now that I'm kind of beyond financially independent, I've taken some, I guess I'd say a little more riskier investments with some startup companies and having a little fun. I call it play money. It's about 10% of what we have. I have in some different startups, but I mean, like I say, save as much as you can, invest in a simple, effective way, like total stock market fund, S&P 500 fund, total international, maybe a little bit of bonds if you're so inclined. They haven't done much for me, but I've always had about 10% in bonds, and then just be patient. But I don't know how patient I would have been if I had known that retirement was maybe on the horizon, some 10, 15 years out from residency.
Yeah, I find, especially with, some of the physicians that I've coached in the past, they're so focused on fire that, they're taking jobs in places that they hate and working 100 hours and taking extra shifts and all this kind of stuff, but at the expense of their happiness, their family's happiness, and not seeing their kids,
It's no good. And I mean, you've already given up your 20s. Like, I mean, I'm not saying I didn't have a good time while I went through medical school and residency, but it's a lot, it's a lot of hours, a lot of time studying, it's a lot of sacrifice. So to do that for another 10, 15 years, now you're 25 years of the prime of your life where you're really not loving it. I think it's okay to take the slower approach and make sure you're happy first. And I think where a lot of people go wrong here is they equate spending with happiness and good times with expensive things. And there's a loose correlation there, but you can have a whole lot of fun and a happy life without spending multiple six figures a year, at least in most places. Maybe if you live in Manhattan, it's a little more challenged, but you can always visit Manhattan. I've been there a whole bunch of times, and I've never had to deal with the cost of living other than for a weekend here and there.
There you go. That's probably the easiest and cheapest thing to do a lot of things. Rent the boat, rent the, right. Take the trip and, instead of the second home, and you can have any cabin you want, anytime you want. So Airbnb,
it's an amazing thing, I tell you.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you plan to return to traditional school when the boys get into high school. What's your plans for when you're back kind of stationary?
Yeah, I don't know. My wife worries about that. She says you have to make sure you keep the blog going because you need something to do. I like to be productive. I don't sit idle for long very well. So I'll probably just continue on writing and talking to people like you on podcasts. It's always fun. And maybe I'll pick up some new hobbies, but I'm already, I feel busy, which is funny because I don't work in the hospital anymore. But I have habits like I do push-ups and sit-ups every day, and I'll try to bike or run or do something to stay active. When we're traveling, we're usually walking, sometimes 5-10 miles a day, depending on where we're at and what we're doing. Trying to learn Spanish. We like visiting, Mexico, South America, Spain. A lot of places we go tend to be Spanish speaking. And so I'd love to actually be able to understand what I'm hearing and getting closer, but I'm not there yet. So there's all kinds of things. I've never been bored. I don't think I've been bored since I left home at 18, and probably not even for a few years before that. Good. I'm not too worried about it.
I think that's the biggest thing, is just to have some type of plan. That's my dad actually retired last week. So
oh wow, congrats to your father.
He's starting his adventure now. But I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, and let everybody, for those that don't know where to find you, where can we find you and connect with you some more?
I'll get on your web browser, type in POFIRE.com, POFIRE.com. That'll take you to Physician on Fire, the website. I'm on, like I mentioned, the socials with Twitter, Instagram, handle @Physician on Fire. On both of those, I have a couple of Facebook groups, one for physicians only called Physicians on Fire, and we're about 31,000 strong there, all verified physicians. Again, that's plural, Physicians on Fire, because it's about you guys, not me. And Fat Fire is another group I started for those of readers who were not physicians that wanted to join a group, and I've got another 20-some thousand there. So pretty active in those groups, and but I think the website is a great place to start.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you joining us, and grateful for your time and your knowledge. Have a great evening.
Well, thank you, Adam. I appreciate the chance to share my story with your audience.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Dads Before Doctors podcast. Family men who are doctors rather than doctors who have families. In an evolving and ever fast-paced world, we cannot lose sight of our real priorities. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had fun. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And tell a friend about the show. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at dadsbeforedoctors.com. Questions, comments, suggestions? Email adam@dadsbeforedoctors.com. And find us on Facebook and Instagram at Dads Before Doctors. Remember, the host of this show is not your doctor, your coach, or your financial advisor. This show is strictly for entertainment. Till next time, this is Dads Before Doctors, signing off.